We're going to discuss the potentials of youth and really on how we harness this. I think if we talk about harnessing, it's more of making something happen. How do you package it? How do you make it work? And with the panel that we have, spanning from policymakers to an academician and also a business person, we want to discuss two perspectives. Number one, we shall look at what is happening in Rwanda and South Sudan. And then we also have another perspective which will be focusing on Africa. Honorable Minister, I will start with you. If we look into the numbers of people in Africa and in Rwanda in particular, we have the youth having a big percentage of the population. What does this mean from a socioeconomic point of view?
Thank you, Zephanie. Muraho neza. Good afternoon. Bon après-midi. My French is just trying to polish. It's an honor and pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for organizing this great event. It's not the first and not the last, but it's very exciting to hear that when you meet as decision makers, policy makers from different parts of the world, you meet together and discuss about harnessing the potential of the young people. The moderator asked about the numbers. They really speak volumes, and they orient all the programs that we do. If you don't plan for them, who do you plan for? In terms of numbers, globally, the statistics of 2019 of the UN statistics projections were showing 60% of the population of Africa, if I may focus on Africa, 60% of them is below 25 years of age. And in particular, to say in Rwanda, it's a young nation. It is a rebirth, it is a new nation that is on its course of development. And if you look at the numbers again, those below 30 years of age, they constitute 70%. And when you look at those who are born, who are 25 years old and below, they constitute 62%. And those who are born after 1994 genocide against Tutsi is over 50% of the population. So you can imagine the magnitude. So are they an asset? Are they a reliability? Are they a time bomb? Are they a threat? It depends on the position of the governments that we take. It depends on the policies that we put together. So as government of Rwanda, we have looked at them in terms of seeing them as the power. The statistics speak volumes, as I said, but the characteristics of the young people we are talking about is not homogeneous. It's not homogeneous. It's not one group that has a specific or one similar program. So you have to tailor the program towards a specific category of young people we are talking about. And these young people that we're talking about, or the youth, they have the following characteristics that I want to raise, where we will pick what do we do with them. First of all, given their number, 70%, it's a big number. You can't underestimate. You have to do something about the numbers. And that number also implies it could be a market, but it also could be a challenge to handle. The young people also, their numbers demonstrate or shows the strength of a nation, an asset of a nation. The numbers also, they are characterized by enthusiasm, risk aversiveness. While us adults, we are so risk aversive, we are scared of doing things unknown. They are so risk aversive. They are so enthusiastic. They are tech savvy. They want to innovate. But also, they are very impatient. I think most of your parents, you know what I mean. They're impatient. They want everything instantly. So sometimes it affects on some of the policies that were not as instant as they want to be. So as a nation, we decided it's a choice that countries decide or make. For example, if you see them as a threat, as I said, they see them as a challenge, a problem, or you see them other way, as an opportunity, as you see them as a big market, as you see them as the powerhouse of innovation, or you see them as the future of your nation. So the government of Rwanda's choice was to see them as an asset, and that's why all the investments that we have put in place to ensure they have good health, they have education, vocational training, STEM, science, technology, engineering and mathematics, and many more. So this all together, for us, the numbers means strength and asset. And I know from the history of Rwanda, this nation was liberated by young people. But at the same time, it was destroyed by young people. And at the same time, as we continue growing and developing our country, we need this young generation also to take over the mantle and make sure that we continue the development that we have. Sustainability happens when we mentor them and we put them on the right track and we move with them and we make them responsible. His Excellency, the President, always tells them that you are not too young to take responsibility, because he speaks from experience. As a youthful young man, he led a delegation, or I would say a group of young people to come and liberate this nation. So that kind of hope is the same hope that we have for this generation. Thank you, moderator.
Thanks, Honorable Minister. If I would turn to you, Minister Irere, Rosemary was alluding to, the potential of youth and also how they can be defined, not as a threat, but instead as assets of Africa. Looking into the National Strategy for Transformation of Rwanda, we're talking about creating 214,000 jobs every year. And we're having this conversation when the world is dealing with a pandemic, where for a country like Rwanda, the economy contracted by 3.4, but we're talking about youth that have to get opportunities. We're talking about youth that have to get jobs. So I wanted you to really double click on some of the programs that the government of Rwanda has put in place to make sure that youth do get access to jobs, and also they make sure that they cope up with the technologies that are coming and be able to compete not only in Rwanda but also in other parts of the world.
Thank you, Zephanie. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks again for extending an invitation to the education sector to be part of this important symposium. And to respond to your question, I'd like to probably highlight a few numbers as well, complementing what Minister Rosemary has also said, but particularly looking at the education sector. Our education sector is made up of 3 levels, namely pre-primary and primary combined, secondary and tertiary. Each year in primary, we have more or less 2.5 million students. And when you reach secondary, this number reduces significantly, and we have about 700,000 to 800,000 students each year. This is in both general education and TVET. This number further reduces and gets to 85,000 students at the tertiary level. You all understand that these numbers represent more or less a quarter of the entire population, and it's mainly in the youth bracket. And so 2 important questions arise, and this is what drives our design or redesign of programs that respond to what the youth need. In the transition from primary to secondary, where do close to 1.5 million students go? And in the transition from secondary to tertiary level, where do close to 700,000 students go? And the second question now would be, what happens, or what are we doing to ensure that those who actually make it, so the the 700,000 to 800,000 students, the 85,000 students that make it to the tertiary level, what are we doing to make sure that they have the right employable skills, or they're able to even create new jobs? The first question, me responding to it, I'm going to now take a closer look to the vocational trainings. The government has tried and put vocational training, and we have what we call foundation levels. So there's level 1 and level 2, and you have around 15,000 students that join it. So you understand that the transition from primary of 2.5 to 700, 800, we are only able to capture 15,000 of them and we direct them through the short training. So where do others go? This is still a problem. And these foundation levels are quite popular, and every now and then we receive requests that district so-and-so would like a TVET school, or sector so-and-so would like a TVET school. The short trainings, they range from 3 months to 1 year, and they cater either if you're a dropout at the primary level, you can still enter, or if you're a dropout at the ordinary level of secondary, you can still enter them. And level 1 and level 2 differ. Level 2 is a bit more complex. The formal and technical vocational training is at the advanced level of the secondary. And this is equivalent to senior 4 of general education. And what we try to do here is to really redesign curricula to be competency-based, instead of what we had before. And we ensure that students that get out of these at the secondary level, they are always able to be employed at this level. We currently have 365 TVET schools and 15 polytechnics around the country. But from a social and economic angle, according to the 2019 Tracer survey, we have 65% of our graduates, they get employed in the first 6 months after their graduation. So this also contributes to the popularity of these programs. TVET in general is clustered in 13 subsectors, and are all selected based on the country's economic priority sectors. In addition to what I just mentioned, rehabilitation and correctional centers have also included in their programs TVET schools. This is to also give a chance to those youth that in one way or another have diverted and found themselves disadvantaged in one way or another, give them a second chance for them to also be able to be employed once outside. Here I'm talking about centers like Iwawa, Gitagata, there's another one in Nyamagabe, and we have TVET schools in 5 prisons across the country. Efforts are also being rolled out across the border. I think from a security standpoint, you understand that putting schools across the border is very important. And as we speak, we're putting around 8 TVET schools around the borders, including one that people never really remember, the Bweyeye sector in Rusizi. Other programs I'd like to probably highlight that also come into play when you talk about supporting the youth. I'd like to talk about the National Employment Program, and I would like to also highlight a skills development fund that was put in place to support now the private sector to now train its own employees, mainly youth, to short-term vocational training and apprenticeships as well. And lastly, we are putting together, or we've just, I think, approved what we call a workplace learning policy that is, it was actually adopted in 2015, but it is going to provide training and certification opportunities through dual training. So which means if I'm if I can still go to school at the same time spend half of my school time at the industry, then I can be certified as well. So there's internship, apprenticeships, and recognition of prior learning. So if you've been in the construction sector for a while, you've acquired experience over the years, we can now recognize that experience and you're given a certificate as well. So I'd like to pause here and maybe we'll come back addressing this in further interventions. Thank you.
Thanks, Minister. Professor Jacob, take us to South Sudan. You've been following the youth across Africa. From security, peace, and stability point of view, what has been the role of youth in making sure that Sudan be where it is today?
Thank you very much. First and foremost, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me here, and I want to say hi, everyone. I'm very careful these days not to say ladies and gentlemen, because I was in a plane coming from Canada. That was a Canadian airline, and then the crew said, ladies and gentlemen, in the planes. And so one of the person raised his hand up and said, no, I'm not a gentleman. And therefore, you would say, hi, everyone. So you have to be careful on that. So the question that I've been asked is very important. And first and foremost, I would like to take you back to define the concept of a youth, who's a youth actually. It's very important for us to know that so that we know which group are we discussing in this very important hall. So for the United Nations, they define the youth to be a person between age of 15 to age of 24. For the African Union, they define them to be between age of 15 to age of 35. And then for Rwanda, they define it to be age of 14 to age of 35, if I got that correctly. For my country, South Sudan, a youth is a person between age of 18 to age of 45. So I'm actually 38 years, and I fall in that bracket if I'm in South Sudan. If I'm in Rwanda, so I don't fall in the category of youth. But of course, the organizers thought that I look like a youth, but my bell head has actually moved faster than it could. So I could fall in between the mid-level and the youth and the sun and the middle sunset. So first and foremost, as Minister Rosemary said, our continent Africa is made up of 60% person under the age of 25, and therefore is a youthful continent. And when we talk about a youthful continent, we appreciate the fact that God has created Africa to be a continent of young person. And that is in two ways. It's for blessing, and it's also for a curse. We have realized that there are some countries in this continent that have not harnessed and have not promoted and appreciate what God has given them in form of being a youthful country in our continent. For instance, we have South Sudan, which has a 78% population of youth. That means we have only 22% that is of mid-level and old age. And if you look at South Sudan today, you will look at it and say, it's unfortunate that the young population that should have been to build states did not do so. And this also cut across Somalia. We've seen in Somalia what happened with the young person. We've also seen in Chad, we saw in Tripoli. We've also seen in our neighboring country like DR Congo and so on. So the role of youth that is supposed to promote and build the nation and provide services to the country have not been done so by the young people. What are the key areas where we can build the potentialities of the youth? Why do we think that the youth are quite potential? They are in three areas. One area is that the youth have energy. They are energetic. They can move faster, they can run, they can do anything. Number two, the youth are able to build their skills and knowledge quickly. That's why now across the whole world, those who are in school, majority of them are the young people. Because the old people that did not go to school cannot come and make it back to go to school at a supersonic speed like the young person. So those who are in school and who are gaining knowledge are the youth. And again, the youth also are at the advantage stage to do innovations. You know, they have the potentialities of having entrepreneurs, you know, building businesses, like what we discussed at the issue of technology. They can do innovations, and they can also move on with their business skills. So those are the potentialities of the youth that we have in the continent. If we look at how do we enhance these potentialities, how do we promote these three important elements of youth potentialities? One way is to engage the youth in productivity. Okay, when they are idle, that's what they say, an idle mind is a devil workshop. When they are idle, then they cannot be able to do well. They can easily be taken off and be distracted from what they should do in the country. We should also employ the young people so that they use their skills and knowledge that they have acquired in schools and high institutions. We should also empower them by giving them schemes, the financial schemes, okay? For instance, in our country, in South Sudan, we have Youth Development Act that talk about giving certain amount of fund to the young people. We have also in the Revitalized Peace Agreement, which was signed in 2018, it talk about empowering youth so that they are assessed to the loans and also get money from the government. If you ask me whether this thing have been implemented or not, that's a different story. Those are in documents and those are in books. But then they are important that such policies are there to promote youth in Africa. If you look at countries that have done very well in terms of promoting the youth in the continent, you will look at Kenya in terms of their empowerment schemes. You look at Ghana, you know, you look at also Ethiopia that have also been very keen enough to promote young people. However, that has not really done well in terms of the youth, doing what they could do in a country such as Ethiopia. You look at Nigeria, they have very important policies of youth empowerment. But again, you also see the Boko Haram coming in, and those who are recruited are the young people. You know, you have also seen in Kenya, whereby when we have election every year or every 5 years, you also see young people being recruited sometime, causing a lot of havoc and so on and so forth. We have also seen in Uganda, the young people are doing their best to talk about democracy. And when they speak about democracy, you hear about chaos sometimes. You know, and sometimes you ask yourself whether democracy should come with chaos or democracy should come with stability. So in terms of South Sudan as a case, we have a very unfortunate young people. If you remember the 2013 conflict that happened between Salva Kiir and Dr. Riek Machar, those who fought the conflict were the young people. The various militia we have in South Sudan, they are all young people that are mobilized from their communities and their ethnic group. And therefore, it has never been a very successful case to talk about youth in my context. If you look at the 2016 violence after the agreement of Addis Ababa, the 2016 violence was also promoted and sustained by youth. But then why are the youth so ready to fight? As I've said, in the context of South Sudan, one is poverty. Majority of the youth are poor because we got the independence of 2011, and then within 3 years, we got a conflict. So there was no time to build states, and there was no time to promote the youth to be able to do their businesses and also give them schools and give them technical opportunities. So they are gun to hire. You can hire them, and they can fight for your war if you want. And therefore, that's a failure of young people. However, that's not being pessimistic in the context of Africa, because for Rwanda, it's a good case altogether. Because I've seen, when I walk around this country, I've seen polytechnics, and I'm told these polytechnics are meant to promote young people to be trained and enhance their skills. I have seen a lot of innovations and business opportunities in technology, and the young people are engaged in all this. This is a very good case. And therefore, the point is, what can the rest of the countries in Africa learn from Rwanda? What they could learn is that if they could take Rwanda to their country, and Rwanda sit there, and Rwanda perform, perhaps they could learn. For half the young people from South Sudan could learn from what the young people are doing in Rwanda. But how do you do that? It will be done through such forums, such as conferences, just as visitations, such as the Rwanda youth visiting South Sudan youth and talking about what they have done better in their country, such as the Rwandan youth visiting perhaps youth in Ethiopia and tell them the story about what they have done. And therefore, that's how we can share knowledge, by exchanging ideas in flat form. So the youth are a critical mass for our continent. But then, if they are not well managed, there could be a threat to the national security. And that's what actually has happened in South Sudan. If we will have said today, the 78% of the South Sudanese don't fight in the conflict in South Sudan, will not have any conflict in South Sudan, because the old people will not manage to fight for themselves. They were there to recruit the youth. So in the context of South Sudan, moderator in peace and security, it is an unfortunate case, but of course it is not, it's never too late. South Sudanese youth could also learn from what others are doing, like in Rwanda, and they can also promote security than being a national security threat. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Jacob. And I'm going to turn to Patrick. Patrick, you've heard about the expectations that policymakers and academicians have on youth. But also, in the morning, one of the panels focused on technology. And we want you to share with the audience here your journey. You've created a company which disrupted the way transport payments were working, and it's been impactful. It's been we're seeing sustainability. It's a model that you're replicating in other countries. What has been your journey?
Sure. Thanks, moderator, and thanks again for having me. My second. Thanks again for having me on the second panel today. So the journey of AC Group has been quite an interesting one. AC Group started with one product called Tap and Go. So Tap and Go is a payment system for public transport using smart cards, and in the back end it has the platform that manages the payment, the devices in the bus where people make the payment, and network of agents, plus float management, e-values, and the likes. So AC Group was started in 2014, and it came in to help with inefficiencies that were in public transport and significantly the revenue leakage. And so we wanted to see public transport become more efficient, more scheduled. And so when we started engaging with stakeholders there, we found out that the biggest challenge they had is that conductors and drivers would take almost up to 20-25% of the total revenues. And so, we didn't look far from what had been developed, and we tried to design one particular solution for our Rwandan market. Now, having the idea, of course, there was a lot of challenges from, what does the first product look like? We initially wanted to build it from here, but we found out that there was a limitation in terms of skills within ourselves. And so we looked at partnerships with systems that had already been built and built on top of them. And then, of course, now there was the roadblock of who is going to trust a young company that of someone with very limited experience, looking young face-wise, talking about transforming a full sector for public transport. And so we asked the bus companies to be able to allow us to do a pilot. We picked one route and did a pilot. The next stage was, so the pilot was very successful. They could see a significant increase in revenue. Now the next step was discussing with different stakeholders, and so City of Kigali, the Ministry of ICT, RURA, together with the bus companies. And again, that challenge keeps coming up. And looking at that pilot, there was a deliberate action to give to give a Rwandan company a chance. Because at the same time when we were presenting, foreign companies like Ericsson that had experience in various countries and many years of doing this in various cities and of course with a huge amount of investment, were also on the table bidding for the same solution. And I remember stakeholders being chaired by our very own, who was here with me, Lieutenant Colonel Patrick, saying, let's give a Rwandan company a chance, because when you get to think about it, much as Ericsson seemed to be the obvious choice because of the experience and the investment, we will never be able to have an Ericsson coming from Rwanda if no Rwandan company is given a chance, because Ericsson itself was a startup at some point in Sweden. And it was given that opportunity, and it's now a multinational operating in various countries. And it's a very good thing to see that we did not disappoint that trust by stakeholders. We were able to scale up. Then the next challenge was fundraising. And so we went through that. Every time we needed almost maybe an X amount of money, you would go to different financial institutions and get a lot of no's, but then the one who decides to collaborate gives you probably a quarter of the amount of money that you need. But what we did is that we always tried to make sure that however much we've managed to fundraise, we can ensure that we put it to very good use and demonstrate the ability of the product to scale. Successfully, we did that, and much later, we did a major fundraise that helped us to fully set up in Rwanda and expand to Cameroon as well in 2017. And then much later, be able to start out in Kenya as well. Of course, it became very challenging because the kind of environment that Rwanda has set up for the youth is makes it very easy for someone to be able to start and scale. Because when you look at the different steps, one is that there's a willingness for stakeholders to take risks. Like I said, for stakeholders being able to say, let us give Rwandan businesses a chance. Number two is flexibility around regulation. Minister Paula said it earlier, innovation will always be ahead of regulation. But the way that we think through this could determine a lot if a company succeeds or fails. If a company thinks about an innovation, or a young person thinks about an innovation, and by the time they go to the regulator denies it because they do not have the regulation in place, then you might kill a business or even kill the timing for it. And so we faced a flexible regulation where Rura said, we do not have the applications license in place yet, but let's create an environment where we can still monitor what you're doing as we try to regulate. And so that flexibility in regulation also created a very good environment for us to start. I believe if we had been delayed by 1 year, we probably would not have started. And so that helps a lot. There's a lot of spaces that have also been created, like K-Lab, where young person is able to come in and meet other entrepreneurs. That in itself gives you that kind of encouragement, and so we're able to do that. The other one is the ability to also create relationships with different countries, and that level of trust where you get to Cameroon and there's a certain, we go to Cameroon and there was a certain level of trust in the Rwandan product. This trust also helped us to be able to start off without too much in negotiation. Of course, there's very strong limitations when you look at our journey when we're expanding outside Rwanda, like Kenya. The challenges are countless, but the fact that you have something that is working back home helps you to keep pursuing. And so we've been in Kenya for 2 years and just got our license last October, and been able to sign with clients. And so those kinds of initiatives have helped create a very good environment for us to start. And most importantly, the ability to be able to have stakeholders that you can coordinate with. Earlier in the initial session, I talked about Generation 2 and in more efficient public transport system. So the journey for Generation 2 to happen requires lots of negotiation from the regulator to the Ministry of ICT to a discussion with RDB, but all these are facilitated so fast. You speak to the minister and the minister understands it and decides to coordinate with different institutions, and you speak to RDB and it already falls in line with the plans that are within the city. And so that kind of environment makes it so easy for a business to be able to scale. And we need to create more businesses that can scale, at least scale home before they go out and meet all these other challenges that I've been trying to share, like we are facing in Kenya. And so, in conclusion, it's just a word of encouragement, to keep taking deliberate risks on Rwandan businesses, young businesses, and also keep creating that favorable environment where a business that has managed to prove that it can succeed can scale much faster through inter-institutional supports like we've received. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Honorable Irere, Patrick was sharing these solutions that have been changing the transport sector, not only in Rwanda, but also in Cameroon, and now here, Kenya is coming on the map. And when the pandemic started in 2020, we saw youth coming out, bringing on board quite a number of innovative solutions, which have been supporting the society, and which will actually be there forever, which will, help on some of the aspects that we're importing as a country. As far as the innovation is concerned, are there other products or solutions that the youth of Rwanda have brought on board, which you would want to share with the audience?
Thank you again for the question, Zephanie. Like you just mentioned, I think during COVID-19, this is when we really saw many of the young people coming up with solutions that were addressing the challenges that we faced during at least the first lockdown. We've seen quite a number of businesses getting into e-commerce, something that was not, it was there, but to a very limited extent. But I think we were talking about it even earlier. A company or a space like Fab Lab, looking at, COVID is here, everyone needs to be protecting themselves, and then they come up with face shields, for instance, putting things together and making it work even during the pandemic. That was not only a source of revenue for them, but they were also contributing to protecting the citizens from the pandemic. We've also seen companies, especially in the special economic zone, that were bound to close given the challenges that were posed by the pandemic, but then they immediately adapted themselves to the demands, and then they started producing PPEs and other materials that were needed during COVID. And many of them were actually some of our beneficiaries in Skills Development Fund, because when they closed, we all asked ourselves now, what is going to happen to the young people that were employed through these programs that were put in place? And when these companies came knocking on our doors saying, actually, last year you had given us just 500 trainees. Now, because of the demand, now. This is during the lockdown, this is during the pandemic. We actually are in need of 2,000 young people to train. We've seen this even in the construction sector, where the young people that either were into apprenticeships or the other programs that I talked about, internships, the workplace learning programs, they all kept work thanks to these industries wanting to reinvent themselves despite the challenges. But speaking of on a whole different level, I think me particularly, I'm always impressed by Irembo. I think in a very limited amount of time, Irembo has proved to be one of those platforms that actually, it has changed the face of service delivery for citizens. And with every service that they add on the platform, they get closer to now delivering a seamless experience to the citizens. And why do I say Irembo and I connect it to the youth? It's because it's led by young people. And even when it started at its beginning, it was also led by young people. And so if we are able to have more of these, I would say, disruptive businesses, such as Irembo, such as AC Group, I think we will be able to actually do more. And with every one of these initiatives, more young people, more people are employed and are given opportunities.
We're talking about African Union Agenda 2063. We're talking about Sustainable Development Goals. How does the youth come into play? What does youth should expect from those programs, and how do we make sure that they are not left behind?
Thank you very much, moderator. Just to compliment my colleague, as she had requested, what other businesses of young people, there are many indeed, and there are many that were born during COVID-19, while everyone was thinking this is a big problem. For them, they would see that as one of the opportunities that they can exploit. Some of them in e-commerce, distribution of foodstuffs at home, and making life easier. We saw companies of young people, young high school graduates who started laundry services at home, in their home, just at the backyard of their home, and they were distributing. So these young people, as we say, they are very agile, they are very innovative. Every problem in the community, they see that as a solution they should provide. It's like a call. Why am I here right now? It means I have to do something about this problem other than complaining about it. And there are others also that adapted their business during this time. We have examples of those who started making hand sanitizers. Before COVID, they were doing something else. But when they saw their businesses are not doing well, they started also doing businesses that are relevant to the circumstances. There are those in agribusiness. They started doing aggregation of foodstuff in urban, from rural to urban. For example, in the Eastern Province, they could come, Kayonza, Rwamagana, they put together all the foodstuff that is needed on the market, Kuchimirongo, and other markets in the city, and they bring all that together. So being a solution to the community is what we all aspire that our next generation could consider. If I come to your question, I think if I start from home, the NS1 itself, it focuses on young people. They have put young people at the center of transformation. In all the three pillars, economic transformation, social transformation, transformational governance, they're involved. Decision-making, they're part of it. They have structures where they can air out all their views, all their voices. Their voices are heard. They are all in these positions of responsibility. While we're coming here, Dr. Jacob was telling us, are you a minister? And he said, in my country, you have to have a stick. So I said, not me, maybe Minister Paula, maybe Minister Claudette. For me, my stick is in the car. that I have it. So you have these young people really given opportunity. If you want them to take responsibility, you give them right now. You don't wait. That's what the young people always say. Why do you say tomorrow? You will be a leader tomorrow. When will tomorrow come? Tomorrow is today. And if you want to have a better tomorrow, you prepare it today. So giving young people like, I think we found the CEO of Irembo, she was here, Keza, Faith. All those are young people, CEOs of companies. We've been also doing an inventory to see how many are there. There's so many. And that gives future, that gives hope. There are challenges, but also opportunities. If we go look at Rwanda, an example of Patrick. I remember I was a PS in the ministry when he was starting, and he was, you could see Rwanda is a country you could consider proof of concept for young startups, even young people. If they can allow Zipline to start distributing blood to remote hospitals, if they can allow SC Group to start in one of the events, I think it was Transform Africa, where they had these swap cards, no one had used it before. If it was not that case, the company would still be in dreams. But because of the environment, the ecosystem that supports young people, it's very possible. That is at home. So they are given opportunity at every level. So if you go continental, in the AU 2063, we all aim at having a prosperous and peaceful continent. How do we have it when we still have challenges that my colleague mentioned earlier? How do we have it when we still have young people crossing the sea and drowning, looking for greener pasture when the pasture is at home that we can exploit? How do we make it happen? All happens with leadership. It is a deliberate effort. It is intentional. It is not by default. It should be by design. And in this case, there are many initiatives that we have at the continental level. We started, and we thank His Excellency, the President of Rwanda, who has been spearheading youth empowerment program. At the continent in 2012, we started a program in Rwanda called Youth Connect. And Youth Connect was a program that connects young people to different unconnected opportunities. So there was a mislink, disconnect. So this Youth Connect came to connect the opportunities. And it was opportunities, especially on access to information, access to peer mentorship, access to market, access to anything that you would mention, especially access to finance, that is always a challenge. So we partnered with different stakeholders, and this program started in Rwanda, 2012. Now we had countries coming to learn, and countries that came to learn appreciated the program. Now it is implemented in 22 countries on the continent. South Sudan is joining very soon. And they also announced in our steering committee that they are joining very soon in this program of Youth Connect program. But to make it happen, we also developed, we had a Secretariat of Youth Connect Africa Hub. So the headquarters is in Rwanda, and it is led by a lady, an executive director from Mali, Uri Keita, and she's based in Rwanda. She used to work in the US, and when she saw this opportunity advertised, because she had met the president sometime in African Union meeting in Addis, she had promised him that she will come and work for him in Rwanda. So this was an opportunity. She left everything and decided to come and settle in Rwanda so that she can serve Rwanda and beyond. So one of those programs are those, and we've been working with other countries, right from Ghana to Madagascar, Mauritius. They are part of Youth Connect program. And it is to connect. We have similar problems. Why do you have to invent the wheel? Why do you have to look for solutions when they exist? Why don't we come and bring it and customize it? If it worked in Ghana, it can work in Rwanda. That is one of the programs. We have another, beyond the continent, a program called Generation Unlimited. I'm glad to see here my colleague Juliana from UNICEF. We've been driving this program together. Generation Unlimited is a global platform that brings stakeholders from private sector, civil society, governments, but most importantly, young people. It's one of the programs that is implementing UN Strategy for Youth 2030. And His Excellency, the President, is the co-chair at the global level. He's the co-chair with the UN Secretary General and the President of Trinidad and Tobago, Her Excellency polar mix, and they are the 3 co-chairs at the global level. So the program started in Rwanda, and we're already implementing, but also implemented in other parts of Africa. Kenya, I think also India. There are many other parts of the world that it's being implemented. So it's a platform also that is helping young people to access skills, but also to prepare them for the opportunities that we see abound. Skills development, employability skills, linking them from work, from a school to work transition, that period where the young people graduate, and to transit into the workforce, it takes them some time. And this is a program that has started since 2018. But also, we have partnership with Prince Trust International for Commonwealth. Yesterday, we had a forum with young people, with the Office of the Prince, and we were discussing about issues in the Commonwealth. So Rwanda is cross-cutting in all these platforms. Majorly, if I come to the conclusion, is how do we tap into the continental free trade area, which is an opportunity for everyone, for businesses, but for the young people. How do we use this as an opportunity to reduce on informal sector? And also for the young people who are unemployed. This is a platform. The Youth Connect Africa Hub has started a program of which they called Export Accelerator. Export Accelerator to help these young people from one country to another and see what are the barriers that they meet every day that can limit them from trading across intra-trade in Africa. How do we make sure it happens? Gentlemen and ladies, it's so difficult to speak after lunch. I'm trying to put some energy in you, and I can see with the mask and everything. Are we together? Okay, good, I can hear now you speaking. So it's always difficult to speak after, but I'm glad you will hear from the questions and comments. So the Continental Free Trade Area is an opportunity for the young people as well in businesses, in innovations like Patrick's, those hurdles that they meet all the time. If we sit together as a continent and we really make it seamless and harness it, if it works in Rwanda, it can work elsewhere. So we see these initiatives supporting young people and seeing them as consumers, but not only as consumers, producers, into production, and also into marketing, and also being proud of their continent. Before COVID came, Youth Connect Africa summit happened in Rwanda 3 times, and His Excellency said, why should we, if it is Africa, why should we have it in Rwanda all the time? So it was supposed to be hosted in Ghana. 4 countries requested to host it, a summit, and Ghana was selected because of regional representation. Unfortunately, we're still waiting until the situation improves. And all our hands together, if COVID is dealt with and we can manage, young people have been requesting, when do we meet next? But they meet with innovations, they meet with ideas, they meet with products, they meet so that they can trade across, they meet so that they can support each other and learn from each other. So there's a lot happening, and it's an opportunity for the young people.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Honorable Minister. And talking of continental free trade area, Patrick, have been talking about the expansion plans for AC Group, and also ministers were alluding to some of the disruptions that were caused by the pandemic. How is AC ready to take on this continental free trade area? How are you going to expand? That's number 1. And then number 2, if you look into all of this disruption that happened during the pandemic, which even led to companies having negative revenues or 0 revenues, and even more companies getting out of business, what are the future? What do you advise to youth, especially, we have more youth in this forum, but we know the session is being recorded as well. More youth will watch this. What kind of lessons would you want to share?
I think the pandemic has definitely impacted many businesses, including ours. Our products being connected or an integral part of public transport has had a significant impact, because every time there's a lockdown, we move to 0 revenue. Every time it's 50%, we're at 50%, 75%, and the likes. So we've been some of the heavily impacted companies. But I think it's also created quite a number of opportunities. In the morning, we discussed about how people are working from home. When you look at mobile money and how much it grew, almost grew by 400%. And so there is a need for people to have less interaction in terms of movement, less interaction in terms of using cash, and many other trends that are coming up because of the pandemic. And so we can also look at it from the other angle of saying it's created lots of opportunities. And so we've seen e-commerce companies sprouting out. So my advice to anyone who's looking at opportunities that the pandemic has created is to, one, look at innovations that will help people with the new trends and new ways of living. And opportunities, innovations in that sector have a very good chance of being adopted by consumers, by businesses, and the likes. And then the second is to also look at ways in which we can make existing businesses more efficient. And so innovation does not always necessarily mean that something is being started from scratch and interfacing with clients directly. Just like AC Group started a tap and go and sold it to commuters and bus companies. Sometimes you can look within an institution. We were in a discussion with Minister Paula a few days back, which was organized by the ministry. And just one of the things that comes up is, looking at Inyanje and, scoping out how many people buy an Inyanje bottle of this size. And you compare that with the existing population, and you ask yourself, if it's 10%, 15% of the population, what else is the population taking? Or why isn't the rest of the population taking Inyanje? Is it because, people are missing out because the bottle is too big, and when you want to buy it for your kids, you need a much smaller bottle, or you need a sachet? Is it too expensive that you need to repackage it and make it cheaper for a certain demographic that is not currently buying Inyanje bottles? And so you can innovate within existing businesses. One, it insulates you from the need for so much investment up front, because then you're riding on an existing, much bigger business. But then two, it also helps to avoid some of the setbacks that we've had during the pandemic. And so looking at innovation from the angle where everyone looks at it of building a new product that is suiting the challenges caused by the pandemic, but then also looking at making existing companies more efficient is also another angle of looking at innovation. And when you actually also get to see most of the companies in these technology hubs like Silicon Valley, majority of them are creating efficiency innovations, selling them to Boeing, selling them to Twitter, selling them to Facebook and the likes, but we never get to hear of them because they become a new product within an existing business. And then coming to the second question around expansion plans for AC Group, I think the AFCFTA has created lots of opportunities. As a business, we believe that starting in Rwanda and being able to operate in Rwanda is very important, but we need to become a unicorn or to become a company that can compete globally. We need to have presence in lots of countries. And initiatives like the CFTA create a very good opportunity. And so some of the things that we're looking at is, one, creating a franchise model, looking at how what we've built and what is required to be able to start a product in Rwanda, and partnering with an existing business in a new country and giving them this model with a step-by-step implementation plan. And then, instead of getting a 5% commission, the commission is probably reduced, but the risks are also dealt with by the local partner that usually knows a lot of the dynamics of that country. And so one, it helps us to scale out much faster, and also helps us to get to multiple countries at one go. And then secondly, another challenge that also the CFTA comes to address is unifying of regulation. And so the biggest challenge that we face right now is that you come to Rwanda, you have to apply for a license. You go to Kenya, you have to apply for a new license for the same product. But when you look at the license application in Kenya, it's exactly the same as the license application that we did in Rwanda. And so if there could be that unification of licensing, which I think is one of the parts of the CFTA, that also helps to have easier presence, because in some of these countries, you almost take a year or a year and a half to apply for a license. And so you haven't started, you're just applying for a license. So CFTA we're also going to make use of that. And then even though this is not part of the CFTA, but the innovation fund that has been set up in Rwanda, that is also going to play a very big role, because it helps us to get a large amount of funds that can help us to set up these franchise models, apply for all the licenses required, bring on board skills that we otherwise would not have gotten hands-on, and build robust technologies that can cover end-to-end public transport, which is one of our ultimate goals. So that is also coming in to help. And so this is what our expansion plans look like, and those are some of the initiatives we want to take advantage of. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. We are about to turn to the audience, but I wanted to come back to you, Dr. Jacob. What do we expect from our youth in Africa?
Say again?
What do we expect from youth? You've alluded to what the youth has been contributing on South Sudan. You went to other countries. What is the outlook?
Right. Thank you very much, Safania, and all the audience. Before I could go to that question, I would like to add something. The other question that was asked about the featuring of the youth within the 2063 agenda, and also Sustainable Development Goal 2030. I would like just to add more on what the minister said, that the youth appear in the two important agenda through the Pan-African Youth Council and also the Pan-African Youth Parliament. The two institutions are very proactive. We have the Pan-African Youth Council headquarters in Khartoum, Sudan, and they have been conducting their meeting every year in Khartoum. So that institution has tried to sensitize and talk about the issues affecting the youth in the continental Africa. And it's a work in progress. So we hope that the African Union head of states and governments will promote the Pan-African Youth Council so that they do more to sensitize and to ensure that the youth are helped to be, to be removed from the violent mentality, the violent culture. So they're talking about removing the youth from the violent culture, try to remove them from fighting in their own countries. And it is something that I should say, if they work well, then there will be a hope for South Sudan to ensure that the young people down their guns and they go to schools and also promote their country and their continent. The second important aspect where the youth appear in the Agenda 2063 and the 2030 Sustainable Development Goal is the Pan-African Youth Parliament. The Pan-African Youth Parliament is very active. The Speaker of the Parliament in this season is from South Sudan. We went to Juba last month with the former Speaker of Kenya, Kenneth Marembe, and they had a good session with the President Salva and talked to the young people about ending violence, about going to school, about doing business, about doing anything that can promote their lives. And those are two hopes that I can add toward how the youth are coming in toward the Agenda 2063 and the 2030 Sustainable Development Goal. How I look at the youth of the Africa is that I look at them in twofold. If they are empowered immediately before conflicts, then there can be very good success stories in the continent. But if they are left not engaged until they join any fighting or any kind of conflict or any kind of revolution, or you call them coup d'etats or whatever, insurgency or rebellion, then of course it becomes difficult for you to change this youth into a civilian and into a productive life. The good case, I said, is South Sudan and Somalia. In South Sudan, the efforts of the United Nations is very, very high in terms of supporting the young people through UNESCO. And even UNICEF, talking about the child soldiers, that the children should leave their guns and they should come to normal life. The UNICEF is trying the level best in South Sudan. But it's getting difficult because the young people are overwhelmingly entered into the culture of violence and culture of gun. So it's important as a country, you don't allow your youth to be idle so that they are hired and be taken by any politician to fight the wars. You have to engage them before the time comes for them to be taken up by any politician. So today in South Sudan, we see a sense of hope because in the universities, we have introduced courses that talk about ethnic peace and ethnic coexistence, so that the young people that have taken up violence to fight for their own ethnicity and their own commanders in the army or in politics should understand that they are not fighting the other ethnicities. They should respect and also promote ethnic peace and ethnic coexistence. So we've introduced courses at university at a very emergency level from last year to ensure that the South Sudanese youth are not perpetually in violence. They should actually come to be good citizens and promote their own country. We have also benefited from the peacekeepers in South Sudan. As you know, we have about 14,000 peacekeepers from all over, and one of the peacekeepers, which I have to mention, not because I'm in Rwanda, is the Rwandan peacekeepers mission. They have done the level best to build schools, primary and secondary schools in Juba, and also in places like Bor and other areas where they have been stationed. And the young people are taught on basic peace initiative, peace education, peace programs, so that they are able to live at peace with their neighbors and live at peace with their own ethnic brothers and sisters. So the youth in Africa is a great, great resource. But of course, countries do not wait for them to be unproductive. They should be engaged immediately, and they should be promoted so that they help and do what they are doing in Rwanda today, and what they are doing perhaps in Kenya, and what they are doing today in Egypt. Some people talk about youth to be a very good ingredient of democracy. But I keep saying yes. The youth can go on and do a revolutions like what they did in Sudan, what they did in African Springs, in the Arab world. But the question is, after all these springs and after all these revolutions, what happened in those countries? Do the youth come back and say, look, we want to fix the country? No. You get a country getting in trouble. We have seen in Sudan today, it's difficult for the young people and women, because a lot of women were on the forefront for the Sudanese revolution, to come and agree on the transitional government. It's difficult now for Sudan. So I keep saying, no, the young people should not be engaged and do revolution. They should be productive. And they should channel their grievances in a proper manner through the ministries of youth and culture. They have institutions that are there, through the youth unions, through the youth council. Rather than for them to be taken up and say, we are overthrowing a government. It will become difficult for you to do that. In 2013, we told people that we are going to take up a gun and we are going to fight in South Sudan. It's going to be difficult for us to fix this country because we are just out of 2 years from the violence with the North. And what united us was the North. That was the only thing. After we fought the North and got independent, people should now invest in the young people. People say, no, that should be tomorrow. It's not now. And what happened today is difficult to fix each other. So let us not wait for us to get in trouble. Then we say we'll fix the youth later on. Let's fix the youth right now before we have the violence coming in. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to re-emphasize what I said earlier as I conclude, is to really look at the transition gaps that I talked about, from primary to secondary, from secondary to tertiary level. The number of students that we lose during those transition periods are quite important, and we've got to design programs that recapture them and bring them back in the formal sector somehow. If we don't do that, then we're at the risk of creating an idle or producing an idle youth. And I think as Rwanda, we know and we have experienced firsthand what an idle youth can do if not managed. Like I said, we're only capturing, this is from an education standpoint, we're only capturing, I think, around 15,000 out of the close to 1.6 million students that are all youth. And maybe just to share this, every time I see RIB or police parading people that are involved in illegal activities, I always look closely and I think and I always see that they are all youth. And in my head, I'm wondering, are these part of the close to 1.6 million that we're not able to capture, that are not productive, that are looking for alternatives to earning their lives? And if we don't do that as a country, and here I'm talking about Rwanda, but I'm sure it's a continental issue as well, because the youth on the continent is quite in huge numbers. So if we don't address this, then it will probably become what the professor was referring to, what we see in other countries as well. So I'll pause here. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Honorable Irere. Honorable Minister Rosemary, final remarks? Yes.
Thank you very much, moderator, and thank you for the opportunity once again. How do we harness the youth potential? I think it's all about, we discussed, and mostly is, we first focus on their health. A health nation is a wealth nation. Are they safe? Do they have all the requirements to grow? Shouldn't be stunted. They should have all the basics, the basic needs of life. So health of our children or the young people is very important. Those diseases that can distract them and stop them from being active citizens. Second is skill set. The skills education could have TVET, but also you need the relevant skills for the labor market. Because right now with COVID-19, we have seen that we need new dynamic skill sets that are required, mostly digital skills. Skills that we need right now is the skills that we didn't request maybe need in the 20 years ago, but they keep on adapting and changing. They should be relevant. The third is engagement. And I like the comment of Patrick where he said we have to be deliberate. Engaging our young people, involving them. We take an example of our president. Amidst his busy schedules, he finds time. He has a program, Meet the Youth. He meets them. He meets even those in schools. He has program, Youth Connect as well, he meets them. He even goes beyond to meet those ones in Rwanda, but meets with others from the continent. Why don't we also have time for our children? If a president of a nation can meet those and have time for the young generation, why not us as parents? We need to find time. And when he meets them, he listens. What are their aspirations? How can we support them as a system? The fourth is creating an ecosystem that supports their innovations, an example, ecosystem that supports on policies, but also in implementation. Last but not least, I would say if we don't harness the youth potentials, they become a security threat, they become economic and social threats, but also they become a political threat where our colleague has been raising these issues. We have seen examples where we have engaged young people. You saw in COVID, we had young volunteers who were on the forefront of supporting awareness campaigns to stop COVID, the spread of COVID. All these were young people who were doing all this. They were engaged. They were shown challenges, and they came out to support. So if we engage them, they're available. The other opportunity I would talk about, we have started working with the Ministry of Infrastructure. We asked them, you have billions and billions you take in the rural areas. How can we work together that some of these feeder roads, which do not require a lot of technology, how can we work with you and we make sure that they are the ones to do that? They become entrepreneurs. Since government has allowed local contracting, why don't we use local contracting in the communities? And we tried it out. Now these young people have 157 companies that are going to create 12,000 jobs in the rural areas in 27 districts. And these young people have potential of creating 12,000 jobs, but also getting the lease equipments from BDF. And this is an opportunity which was lying idle, being given to big companies, which can be given to small companies of young people. And you are developing them to become future entrepreneurs, and they are doing it within their own communities. This has started, and it has a potential to use about 15 billion Rwandan francs every year from RTD and the Ministry of Infrastructure. Another example is Ecological Brigade. We have started working with the Reserve Force that is here in the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Environment. We organize youth in cooperatives in 3 districts. in the western province, Karongi and Ngororero, and one in the southern province, Muhanga. We have about 5,000 young people in Ecological Brigade. It is another brigade for you. It is ecological conservation team. These young people are conserving the Nyabarongo catchment area. And what they do, they also get money from these projects, but they organize in cooperatives, amasibo, where they save. When they save, they create other businesses as well. So within just 8 months, they had saved 10 million Rwandan francs. And we complimented them, we left them with the support so that they can really, to motivate them, all of them to be in cooperatives, financial inclusion, but also saving and making sure that they, when this project is over after 3 years, they don't go back to poverty. So it is deliberate, it is intentional, it is by design, it will not work itself out. Thank you for taking all the time.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Professor Jacob?
Thank you very much. Just to conclude, we are looking for the way forward. So we have seen the challenges of the youth, and how do we enhance the youth to move forward so that we make them the positive ingredients of our development. First and foremost, you must allocate resources. You must allocate money to the Ministries of Youth and youth organizations. Because without money, you are not able to develop and harness the youth. In my country, the Ministry of Youth and Culture has 2% of the budget. The government allocates 2% for the budget every year, and that is very minimal. I'm not sure about the Ministry of Youth here in Rwanda. I don't know how much you allocated, but I guess it could be very low because a lot of government of Africa look at the ministries like Ministry of Gender, Ministries of Youth, Women Affairs, and so on to be less important, and they give them less money. So give them more money. As Nigerians said, you know, without money, you know, you can't do anything. So you must have money to make things move. Secondly, you must hold youth organization accountable. You know, a time when you allocate resources to the youth organization, let's say the scheme, the funding scheme, most government organizations and departments, they don't follow this money that has been allocated to the youth organizations. At times, the young people corrupt this money and they play with it, and later on you get yourself in trouble at the head of that department. We saw that in Kenya when we had what they call Simama Kenya Youth Fund. You know, it was misused, and later on we got the minister in trouble. So let's hold the youth organization accountable for any penny given to them for their self-empowerment and for the development. Allocate also the quota representation for the youth in terms of political representation. In some countries, they are like 20, 25% or 30% youth representation, but in some countries it's still very, very low or not even there. In my country, we are yet to get a legislation to ensure that the youth get like 25% of their representation in politics. That is in parliaments, that's in cabinets, and other governmental departments across, even judiciary. So when the youth get this quota, they can be able to work very hard and they can represent their interests. Fourthly, we need to ensure that the ministries of youth are empowered, they are supported. In the parliaments, and I think this is important, in parliaments, it's important that the other governmental department, the other ministries should support the ministries of youth and culture. Because as we say, Africa is 60% youth. If these ministries are not supported to get what they deserve to help the young people, then of course, then we are not going to make sure that Africa is peaceful. So we must ensure that the ministries are supported so that they get us initiative and ensure that the national development on the youth affairs is mainstream and the youth issues are addressed. Second to last is that countries that are peaceful in Africa must support and bring peace to countries that are at war. I've said this earlier that the Rwanda Defense Force has done its best in South Sudan. They are there as peacekeepers, they've helped a lot, they are doing developmental processes, and they are doing very well in terms of helping South Sudan. We have seen that, we have seen Ghana, we have seen Ethiopia, okay? We have seen Kenya in peacekeeping. So we have to ensure that if one country in Africa is at war, then also we are also in trouble. We should not sit back. We should also ensure that we put that fire off when it is not out of hand. And by doing so, then we will ensure that those youth are helped not to die, and they are also empowered in handing them their skills. Finally, there is a gap that we have seen in terms of international, regional, and national processes of youth empowerment. If you come to the African Union, you don't see a sense of synergy whereby the regional instrument and national instrument are all combined to work with the international instrument or regional instrument. So there's a need for the African Union to ensure that they create a platform where the ministries of youth meet annually to discuss and compare notes about challenges of each country in Africa, and also move further to the United Nations to ensure that the youth affairs are taken at the international level, regional level, and national level. And by doing so, no one will complain that we are behind, and nobody will complain that we have gone higher in the continent. You are all going to fool each other to ensure that you work together as members of one region. Finally, I know the discussion on youth affairs, gender, and even human rights are some of the discussions that you find them very boring. And that's why you see the whole is a bit halfway. You don't get the answers and you don't take them home. But I think I want us to take the youth affairs seriously. Because I said earlier, these young lions are the majority in our continent. If we don't have interest, we must develop interest to ensure that the youth enhancement and developments and their progress is taken care of by African with their own hand, by African governments, and by international partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A round of applause to the panelists. We're coming to the end of our panel, and we definitely picked great lessons in terms of how we should harness the potentials of the youth. And key takeaways include make sure that we make deliberate efforts to bet on youth and to also give them opportunities. And we make sure that they allocated resources as a healthy nation actually becomes a wealthy nation. We also heard about taking time to speak to youth and to make sure that we even bridge the gap that is in the mindset or across the generations, and also ensuring that we promote the culture of accountability. More were said, but I just wanted to give that brief summary, and thanks again.